Hey, Cypher here. It's common to speak of historical Germany like it began in 1871 or as where German-speaking people exist or were ruled. Neither of these are adequate. So this episode is about what that term has meant throughout time. Also, this is part of Operation Deutschland, a collaboration dedicated to German history, so be sure to check that out. And what a perfect way to go on that journey as to know what that label contains. Yet this is contentious because people like to impose national borders backwards in time, including ones as regularly fought over as these. Bounding Germany is a deep historical problem at its core, and rife with conflict from empires, nations, and even the Soviets. What counted as Germany was enigmatic from its earliest usage. We don't really know where it originates, but Latin speakers eventually designated what they considered barbarians east of the Rhine and north of the Alps as Germans, as opposed to Celts, also known as Gauls. Not until the 18th century AD did the sense of German as a language group come about, or even philology in general. The earliest Germanic inscription we know of dates to around the 3rd century BC. Around that time, numerous tribes migrated southward and clashed with the Greco-Roman world, especially the Teutons during the Cimbrian War. The first time we see Germania as a place is the brief decade after Rome's conquest of land between the Rhine and Elbe in 12 BC. That's when they created a province by that name, though they failed miserably to hold it. There were later Roman provinces called Germania Superior and Inferior, bounded to their east by the series of fortifications called Limes Germanicus. Beyond that border was Magna Germania, or Greater Germany. This simply referred to the area not under Roman control and inhabited by Germanic tribes. It was a cultural designator. Eventually that border imploded and Germans attacked. Goths, Visigoths, Vandals, Franks, Anglos, Utes, Saxons, and many others conquered the Roman Empire instead of the other way around. In 476 AD, Odoacer, a German who'd integrated into the Roman social order, deposed the Western Roman emperor and declared himself King of Italy. Germany as a place name had no regional designator for many centuries after the empire fell, but in a very real sense, all of Central and Western Europe was thus. As the Visigoths took over Iberia, Franks took over Gaul, Anglos and Saxons took Britannia, Ostrogoths took Dalmatia, Vandals took North Africa, and many more, expanding what the Roman Empire would have called Greater Germania much further than anywhere most people would think of today. Even though the Franks are the namesake for France today, they would be the origin of the next Germany. Charlemagne and his Carolingian ancestors conquered much of Western Europe by the 8th century. In a bid to wrest the name of the Roman Empire from Irene of Athens, since Pope Leo III denied that a woman could be empress, he crowned Charlemagne emperor instead. His so-called Holy Roman Empire, which in the words of Voltaire was neither Holy Roman nor much of an empire, intentionally took the namesake of the Roman Empire. But that only lasted another generation before Charlemagne's grandchildren split the empire in three over a succession dispute called East, Middle, and West Francia. The Eastern partition would eventually become the inkling of a new Germany. After the death of the last Carolingian king of East Francia, the 5 duchies of Bavaria, Franconia, Lotharingia, Saxony, and Swabia came together and elected a new monarch. Following monarchs would remain elective from then on, despite the electors changing throughout the following centuries. Henry the Fowler began uniting various German countries surrounding East Francia, preventing a feudal collapse like what happened in West Francia. He wanted to get crowned emperor, but then died too quickly. His son Otto instead became emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. People at the time regularly replaced the term East Francia with Germany, and Otto's focus on continuing his father's legacy of union provided for what would become known as the Kingdom of Germany, which was rebirthed out of lexical convenience. It's easier to say Germany instead of East Francia. That's really all it was. So the HRE continued to expand, but they differentiated between kings of Germany and Italy, which many emperors were also kings of. The Alps were the difference. Emperors adopted numerous titles, but the King of Germany was never a separate title from the Holy Roman Emperor. That's why this is generally considered the First Reich. The empire itself kept fracturing as power devolved to local lords over time, to the point that it was pretty much a non-entity. Eventually, the Habsburgs came to dominate, basically making the crown a hereditary one, even though it still remained technically elective. They also controlled Spain, Hungary, and the Netherlands, and other things that are not normally considered German. So while Germany receded, its various constituent countries became more powerful and independent, including Prussia, which would eventually become the Second Reich. When Napoleon took over much of the HRE, he created the Confederation of the Rhine, sometimes called Napoleonic Germany. This precipitated the official end of the HRE in 1806, with the Habsburgs keeping only Austria as an empire. With the defeat of Napoleon, Europe had to decide what to do with the shattered HRE. So the 1815 Vienna Conference created a different confederation simply titled the German Confederation. It barely functioned, since it required unanimity for any decision. But technically, the Confederation couldn't legally be broken. As a superstate, it was even less of a solid entity than the HRE, which of course doomed it to failure. How to unify Germany, despite it never having been fully unified, became the central debate of what Europeans referred to as the German question. Who would be the most powerful, and how would they become something greater than a confederation was that question. And nationalism arose to answer it. They defined Germany through language, rather than ancient tribal affiliation, medieval feudalism, or modern aristocracies. Newly professionalized historians argued German speakers were a singular ethnicity, and the current conversation was simply a placeholder for an eventual nation-state. During the Spring of Nations in 1848, revolutionaries congregated in Frankfurt to proclaim a new German empire. While they wanted all of the German Confederation to join, both Austria and Prussia crushed the revolution. Austria's empire declined significantly in the ensuing decade. They also crushed the Hungarian Revolution, which weakened the entire empire. Their leading foreign minister, Clemens von Metternich, who had basically engineered Europe's peace prior to 1848, fell from power. Austria was involved in some Italian wars that would actually end up in defeat. Besides, German speakers only counted for 23% of what composed the empire. So Prussia was gaining power, and their newly appointed prime minister, Otto von Bismarck, was determined to exploit it. He said, "Not through speeches and majority decisions will the great questions of the day be decided." That was the great mistake of 1848 and 49. Instead, it will be by iron and blood. 2 years later, Austria and Prussia came together to defeat Denmark for the supposedly German lands of Schleswig-Holstein. Bismarck used a dispute between which state would control the newly acquired territory to start a war between Prussia and Austria. And in a stunning victory, Prussia won in only 7 weeks. They dissolved the old confederation and formed a North German confederation. Bismarck then baited Napoleon III of France into declaring war. Rallying 4 South German states to their cause, Prussia got a massive victory. In the halls of Versailles, Prussia declared Wilhelm I was the new German emperor, unifying a lesser Germany into a Second Reich that did not include Austria. This also meant that some of the constituent monarchies within Germany remained, despite being beholden to their Kaiser. which is actually just German for Caesar and a closer pronunciation to the actual word Caesar. So Wilhelm I had a polyglot empire just like the HRE, just with a lot more unification. Plus, expansion didn't end there. Bismarck initially resisted creating colonies, but in 1884, he allowed Germany to join the scramble for Africa. By the late 19th century, they'd conquered 4 areas in Africa and several islands across the South Pacific. Taking revenge for Chinese murders of German missionaries and quashing the later Boxer Rebellion, they even gained claims in China. While they crushed revolts in Africa, they participated in 2 cases of genocide, one of which being the first in the 20th century. The German Empire had colonies all around the world. During World War I, Austria-Hungary allied with Germany, but only as co-equals, rather than another German confederation. Germany managed to take much of southern Russia and keep their conquest under the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, forever proving that it's actually quite possible to invade Russia during the winter. But they didn't fare as well on the Western Front. Revolutions broke out toward the end of the war, forcing the Kaiser to abdicate and Germany to surrender before it got worse. Yet it still did. Even as the Weimar Republic formed, implementing some of what the nationalists advocated since 1848, the Allied powers carved up the old German Empire and imposed a harsh peace. In 1923, they lost even more of their territory when France claimed they were delinquent on paying reparations. French troops occupied the incredibly industrious Ruhr region for 2.5 years. It was humiliating. The Nationalsozialistische Deutsche Arbeiterparty, or Nazis, used those ill feelings, along with political conniving and demagoguery, to rise to power. They claimed that these problems were because Jews stabbed Germany in the back, a blatant and hateful lie. In 1933, Hitler became the fascist dictator of Germany, ending the Weimar Republic and instituting a Third Reich. Fascists believe they represent the nation and may exercise totalitarian control in order to rejuvenate the nation and expel supposedly foreign elements. Hence the repression and genocide Nazis committed during their short 12-year span of power. Not only did they want to take back territory, but also to gain enough living space, or Lebensraum, for the German people. So Hitler quickly remilitarized Germany. The first territorial acquisition was Austria in 1938, thereby finally realizing the Greater Germany that nationalists spoke of since the mid-19th century. Using the pretense of Sudetenlanders, he annexed the entirety of Czechoslovakia, and despite Neville Chamberlain appeasing him, Hitler invaded Poland and partitioned it between Germany and the Soviet Union. Soon Germany conquered France, much of Eastern Europe, and even deep into Russia. Luckily, the Allies defeated Nazi Germany, ending such territorial claims. The Allies split Germany amongst themselves after the war. British, French, and American territories combined to form West Germany, and the Soviets formed East Germany. In much of the Eastern Bloc, Soviets expelled Germans along with numerous Germans fleeing after the war. An estimated 16 million moved, along with 2 million dying in the process. Including other nationalities and ethnicities, the post-war refugee crisis is the worst in world history, which compounded the devastation from the war and Holocaust. This refined where German speakers were, and with the partitioning of Germany and removal of territories, this movement meant people had to choose which side to go on. By the 1960s, more and more were choosing to go to the west, so the Soviets built a wall to keep people from fleeing, transforming East Germany into basically a prison. Not until 28 years later, in 1989, did the wall fall. In a stunning series of events, the entire Soviet system collapsed. 1 year after mass immigration was allowed to resume, East Germany unified with West Germany, mostly adhering to the Western Constitution. The Germany we know today was born in 1990. 2 years after me, actually. So in a very real sense, I can say that I'm older than Germany. As you can see through this history, the concept of such a state changed over time. The term Germany first referred to tribal lands, then Roman provinces, East Francia, the northern half of the Holy Roman Empire, Austria, a couple confederations, a revolutionary nation-state, the empire that Prussia controlled, colonial possessions in Africa and the South Pacific, the Weimar Republic, Nazi-controlled territories, the bifurcated states of East and West Germany, and finally what we have today. Germany was an ever-changing concept with several clear breaks in continuity. Many died for the sake of those definitions. It would be absurdly anachronistic to apply borders backwards and pretend these are all a single history. Instead, there are many German histories. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to click on that Operation Deutschland playlist. Somebody wants whiskey. Yeah. You're being a nuisance. Already. I haven't even started to talk. Be a nuisance, I'm gonna pick you up. Say hello to everyone. You wanna be on camera? This is the price. Oh, thank you. Goths, Visigoths? So, what are you gonna do about it? Wow. This is not the attention you wanted. Oh, thank you. Meow. Thank you. Wow. Hi. You were the one talking. Now I get to pick you up.